Who cares? Nothing, no harm.
We're discussing the Agnes Scholar, the name of Socrates, contention that all wars are really failed conversations, are really debates. And of course, her argument is going to be that because war is not a good way to settle debates, we should replace war with Socratic argument. But before that, we're trying to figure out if it's true that wars are debates, because, right? What's the reasons to think that a war is really kind of an argument? So there's like these two theories. Look, we're putting on the table these two theories of a war. One theory is that all wars and all human conflicts boil down to like conflict of interest in the low sense, in the sense of like where we discussed the primary example of that, or like a very sharp image of that would be the two people on the boat, where there's only one lifeboat, and therefore one person is going to have to push the other person into the water, or they both die, and we're trying to contrast that with the normal case of a fight, like what's the regular, like stereotype, like archetype case of a war. It's different than that, right? And of course, some people will say that all wars boil down to that. And some people will say the opposite, that all things boil up to a debate, an argument, right? Does that make sense? Summary?
Yeah.
So now, there's a few arguments that she makes, and a lot of people make, for why what?
For why wars
are... One is for why we would claim that a war is always an argument, and actually more specifically an argument over justice, or which we say who is right? Which is a way of talking about justice. So like there's one question, which is, can we frame all the wars as not about who is right? Let's make the question like this: would there be any war if everyone would really agree the question isn't who's right? The question is only who is stronger, or whose interest prevails.
I mean, if I think
would that be an accurate description of any human wars or conflicts? Or most of them?
I think like if we look at older human conflicts, maybe they were on the basis of just I need more space or I want more space.
Are there such a thing? Is there such a thing?
Thinking.
Like, could you remember of a war where, like she has this thing where she says, like, if I'm pushing my friend off the boat, I might say to him while I'm pushing him off, it's nothing personal. I don't have anything against you. I don't hate you. Which is another way of saying, I don't think you're wrong. I think you're just as right as me. I just happen to be the stronger one. So therefore, you drown, I survive. Would that be a description that would match any war where people can say, well, I mean, in some very funny sense, there's such things where, like, maybe there's like two professional generals, like mercenaries on both sides, who could like fight and then say, well, I'm just doing my job, you're just doing your job. But that's like very far from, right? That's not really the story.
Let's say, I don't know, for example, like Alexander the Great, right? Mm-hmm. Where he was the closest person to conquer the actual world, mm-hmm. right? For why did he do it? What did he want it for? He wanted that everyone should have his ideology, or did he just want more space?
No, he wanted them to adopt the Hellenic, or whatever. I don't even know, but I think it was something like that.
I don't think it was for Hellenism. No, that was later. I think. No.
I don't think so.
Even
if you look in the ancient world, also, I think like a lot of people describe, like especially the kings fighting in tandem with the gods, right? And the idea is that the king's victory is a victory of this god, right? Or this idea, or this value, or this virtue, right?
So let's think like this. There might, you see, this is like why am I even having this conversation? Because it gets to the whole conversation of people like saying God is on our side, which is another way of saying the war is not really about who is stronger, it's about who is right? Mm-hmm. When people say we're not just stronger, it's because God is on our side, what they really mean to say, God is symbolizing God in the aspect of justice here, right? Not God as just the strongest guy around, because that would not help anyone, right? God in some aspect of being just, and they're saying we're right, and it happens to be God sometimes makes the right people win. Okay, that's a different problem. Is there a way? I actually think there is a way. Like, if you have a very purely might makes right or might is right kind of
Nietzschean style.
Style understanding of politics, then the implication of that would be that then if you lose, you would really believe that you're wrong. You see, because that was like a test. We have a test also from Agnes. Test was, if you say you're fighting for freedom or whatever the ideal is that you're fighting for, then what do you say when you lose? Because if it's really a fight for that, then it seems like, I'm not sure this follows. So.
I mean, this is kind of like Darwinistic idea of like the best idea will always win, right?
No, that's not what's behind this. This is a question for someone that says, I am not just fighting because I'm stronger and I could, right? I'm fighting because I am right. In other words, my fight is really the right idea, the correct way of living, or whatever the rightness, we have to figure out how the rightness consists of something. But me, if I have a fight with my friend and I punch him and he punches me back, and I'm right because he started it or whatever it is, right? Then my punch is not here to just get revenge, or really this is just justification. This is where revenge really is rooted in justice, right? I'm saying now I'm enacting the justice by punching you back because you deserve it, right?
Okay, but can I ask like maybe a simple question? Like, these are obviously ideas that can motivate human activity, right? So let's say, for example, someone on the basis of their idea attacks me, right? On what basis am I defending myself?
Because you're wrong. You don't get to attack me, right? The thing you're wrong about is that you don't get to attack me. You're wrong for attacking me.
Right. Okay. What I'm saying is, with a lot of these wars, also there's disagreements about who is the provocateur, right?
So that's the war. There's a machlokes about that, and the war is supposed.
I think more and more take on the shape.
Pretend always like this, but we pretend that the war is going to settle that question, right? We're fighting in a war in order to settle the question of who is right, right?
Only the provocateur has to think so, though.
No, everyone has to think that.
I mean, the person who's defending, right?
Also, same thing.
So that's my question. So the person who's defending themselves, really, when the guy is reaching out to
it's
hit
right
me,
to defend yourself. Doesn't matter if there's not the original idea. I'm correct because you're just purely attacking me for no reason. If there would be a reason, then I would have problems. That's why if I first attacked you, and then we can go back all the way until...
Let's say I assume what we need is a conversation to figure it out. Right? And we do need a conversation to figure it out, right? But I'm firmly of that opinion.
Why?
And you just want then you launch the missile on me. Let's just...
No, but that's not the point. The point is that anyone that's fighting, whatever it is, he thinks he's in his fight is really like a representation of an argument. It's like, I'm fighting because I'm right?
Yeah, that's my motivation to fight, but like, let's say I lose, right? So you're saying if I lose, then I wasn't right? Well, that's just the motivation, but that's not proving me that I was wrong.
I mean,
right?
if your fight is a kind of symbol of, would be a real symbol of the rightness in you. In other words, when you win, you say justice won, right? But when you lose, you don't say that. There's something asymmetrical, right? You don't say justice lost, or you don't say, I guess the other guy was right. When you win the war, do you say, well, I must have had good guns? You say, no, Baruch Hashem, justice won, God won, right? But then when you lose, you don't say that. So
you could say that from Anthus Morgan, but I'm saying
that's at the end of the day, we're talking about what people say, right?
No, at the end of the day, you won, and justice won with you, yes.
So we're talking about what people say. So people claim when they win, they claim that it's not just that whoever had the biggest guns won, right? They're claiming God helped us win, right? Which is another way of saying justice actually prevailed over injustice, right? My version of justice was proven to be right on the battlefield, right? That's what they're saying.
Okay.
Which means that behind this, there seems to have been an assumption that one way of proving, of deciding, of having an end to this machloikes, this argument about who is right, is to kill the guy that's wrong. Right?
Okay.
That's what. Otherwise, justice wouldn't be winning. It would always just be guns winning. Right? Well, you can't even say that. Even as a motivation, it wouldn't work. Just to be clear, we're just using this in the result claim, but it wouldn't even work as a motivation. Motivation has to make sense.
But doesn't make it.
I'm fighting because I want justice to win, right?
But doesn't make it not justice if I lose.
Which means, well, according to you, this is a question for you, who says that I'm fighting for justice, or that when I win I claim that justice won, and therefore there's no more injustice. And now I ask you, okay, if you lose, would you say, I guess, either justice loses, or you would say, I guess, actually what you should say is the other guy must have been right? Right?
Justice won, I just wasn't justice?
No.
Yeah, that's what you have to say.
Why?
Because otherwise you're denying your assumption that there's any way of the battlefield deciding who was right.
Well, because when
the question simply put is, could a war decide who's right? We're having an argument. Can a fight between us solve it?
If you're doing
just
something,
because I'll say that if I win,
well,
doesn't mean it's true.
we're taking what people
You
say.
tell me
Of course,
this
wait.
Rebbe is the Rebbe, and I tell you that Rebbe is the Rebbe. If I sock you in the face, am I getting closer to an answer?
No.
Okay.
So then why are you socking me in the face? Because I said the wrong thing.
It wasn't in the name of justice.
Yeah, it wasn't. Of course it wasn't.
How dare you?
Wait,
How dare
wait.
you say
We have to. We're now discussing with people, right? We're taking them seriously.
Right.
We can't say, well, you didn't really mean. Okay, maybe that's true. Maybe that's going to be the conclusion. Now we have to figure out what you did mean. But assuming that we're talking with a person who says that he's fighting for justice, or that justice is winning, and then always I have to ask him, are you real about this? And this is basic Socratic tactic, right? I showed you that your assumption behind this is a very weird assumption, which you will yourself. When I show it to you, you realize that it's weird. Because it seems weird to say that rightness can be decided by who is stronger. And that's basically what's behind what you're saying. Yeah. That's what is the basic problem with claiming that God helped us win a war.
Right.
Because we were right. Right. Because when we're wrong, we don't say, God must be on the other side.
Right.
That would be the argument. It's very serious. I think it's a very serious argument. That's right. You might waste the solve it, but I'm just saying that it's ground.
Right, but I mean, let's say you do take a self-skeptical posture, right? So just because I think that this is all true when it's quarantined, but if you put it in the real world, well, I think what ends up being misperceived is, okay, I'm attacked. I haven't had this, again, maybe I'm being idealistic in this assumption. I haven't had the conversation yet, and he didn't give me a chance to. Or for whatever reason, I disqualify you as a capable participant.
So then, what you're telling me is that it's what you told me that you're fighting in the name of justice is wrong. You're not fighting in the name of justice. It was just a funny thing that you say for your children or for your soldiers to convince them or whatever.
Yeah.
Really, you're fighting.
It's a mistake.
You think that you're just. Entirely separate. Justice is entirely separate.
Okay, but then what are you fighting for?
No. So, okay, right. Okay, so
what you're fighting for is, and also just to be very clear, you can't win. It's very sad. It means that you can't win. This is basically what people say. This is basically another. When people claim, when people go around saying it's cliche, you can't kill an idea, right? What they're basically saying is, I think the other guy is right, right? Because of course you can kill ideas in the sense of some of the people that hold the idea and so on. What they really mean, what is behind this sentence, you can't kill idea, right? The idea will still be there, is that the other guy is right. The fact that you're stronger and you might win is not going to convince me that he's right. Of course, that might even motivate other people to then take on the cause and so on. But their basic thing is that the presumption that war can solve the question of who is right is not going to work. And what are you going to tell me? That I don't need that because I think that I'm right and I also want to survive, but I'm not really fighting in the name of justice. And my war is not going to resolve it. So it still seems that the war is kind of futile.
Right, but it seems interesting that it's
only a question of survival. And nobody really fights a war just to survive. Just to be clear, there's always a way out. Right? Just to be clear. You tell me that Iran, there's a way out. All the Jews could pack up and move back to wherever they came from, to Florida, Miami. There's a lot of real estate there.
No, they can't.
They absolutely could. It's as easy and as expensive as fighting wars all the time.
7 million people.
It's been done.
When?
Last week.
What?
What do you mean? You don't listen to the drushas about how many immigrants there are in America? Pretty easy.
That took 4 years.
Okay, we'll make a plan. It's possible. And we'll spread out the Jews, each one. The Vada, the national, what's it called? The Sochnut will set up a committee. They'll send every block to a different country, so to say that will probably be the best way to ensure actual survival. So to be clear, if we think about literal survival, people like to pretend that it's literal survival. It's not. There's always an idea that says we have the right to survive and the right to survive in a certain way. If you take out the right, you're left with nothing. Because pragmatically, just to be clear, firstly, everyone should just pack up and go somewhere else. Even Howell is safer than anywhere in Israel, and maybe won't be after they finish winning everything. But meanwhile, it is, right, and has been for the past since this. I mean, since there's a state, it wasn't safer than how. You could always make shpoinus, it was because whatever. But in reality, that's their basic reality.
Yeah.
But the point is, and the reason they're fighting, and everyone, in every single war, there's always an option: give up, surrender. Almost always, unless there's like Milchem Samalek where we're going to genocide you. There's always an option, like be a slave or almost always, not literally always, but almost always. So it's not really correct that like, okay, I'm not going to win my rightness. I'm just going to survive because I happen to be right and I think that I have a right to survive. There's always there seems to be a delusion always, right? According to the Socratic argument, there seems to be a delusion that I'm going to somehow prove my rightness in war because I failed to prove it in the UN and in the United Nations, by conversation, by diplomacy, whatever.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's a problem because I can't actually do that. Not because someone else says I can't do it, the people that think I'm already wrong. You yourself say you can't do it because when I ask you if you lose, if you'll decide that you were wrong, you say no. We had a discussion about this once last year. Remember? About wars in the name of the truth or in the name of
Because of
It's about this question. Yeah? Pretty sure they would discuss this parallel.
I thought we had a different.
There's always this, but now we're having this parallel. I think that now there's a question because obviously so one solution would you're asking if there's a problem. It's kind of weird that you can't
but something
claim that you're going to win and when it's like tails I win, heads
I'm trying to figure out how this Socratic view accounts for like the fact that at the end of the day an idea carries itself out, and it does result in itself carrying out. Like the point isn't that if you winning the war is relatively inconsequential, but losing a war has consequences, right? The consequence is living in subjugation of another value.
But it still doesn't show that you were wrong.
Winning over here, right? I agree that there's a mistake here in saying that justice won when the war was won. Justice only won in the sense that now what you believe is justice.
So let's try to see if we could figure out a way. It didn't win at all. So
I don't want to be a slave, right?
Let's try to think. I actually think something like this, but I wonder how true it is. So there is a way.
I don't want to be a slave because you didn't convince me yet, right?
Okay, so
if you convinced me I should be a slave, I wouldn't be resisting, right? So the problem isn't just.
But can you convince me by killing enough people? Can you convince anyone of anything by killing enough people?
No. But the
possibly.
The frustration.
The argument I had with you was how many people you can kill or something like that. Not that.
No, I thought you meant like if the guy threatens to kill you.
Yeah, you could coerce me, you could force me to do something.
Right, but that's not
you can't convince me to do anything, right?
No, but we'll go a little something like this. Let's just simplify it. I believe that the world should be painted blue. You believe that the world should be painted red, right? If you win, your war, the world will be painted red.
Okay, but
meaning the ideal will prevail even if it's incorrect. So when people say justice won, it's still them clinging to their idea that they don't believe that justice was won in people's minds. They believe that justice was won in the sense that it's being carried out in the world.
And your idea still lives that it should
That's
be blue.
the idea. The idea is that now I got the world is blue. Look at it. Now does it mean that the world ought to be blue? That's something we can hash out. That's only a conversation could solve. But when we say justice prevailed, we don't mean that. We mean that the results of justice prevailed. I think I don't think it's like such a random mistake. I think it's a slight mistake.
So then what's the mistake?
The mistake is assuming that something being that a war will that since the war is resulting in something being carried out, that almost as if the proliferation of something I don't know.
The idea wasn't carried out. But
sure it was. Meaning I want to paint the world blue, you want to paint the world red. I just want to think about it this way because I think it's the easiest, right? I win and I paint the world blue.
Okay. But was my idea eliminated? No.
No.
The idea is still floating.
Okay, it sort of depends how
I know, but we're ignoring the fact that at the end of the day, we're acting like when you win the war, you don't paint the town blue. You do.
Right.
Right? So how do you account for that component? It doesn't make it right, but it means it was carried out.
But my idea is still
So
living.
the fact that I never entered into dialogue means that I never submitted my idea to be challenged.
No, but part of your idea is erasing my idea too. But my idea still lives.
Your idea still lives, yeah, and I agree. Meaning,
So
I did not
win.
I didn't win in the sense that I didn't convince everybody to paint the
Right.
town blue.
Right.
I just painted it blue.
So that's not winning the war.
Right. I agree. But
So wait. So let's
not losing it
try
either.
to see.
Yeah.
If it would really mean something like that, then we have. If we would want to, like, so in other words, let's change it, because you're saying like this. I'm thinking of very like theoretical in the sense of knowing the truth sense of winning, and of course you can't show the truth in any way by force. Force is not the way to show the truth. The only way to show the truth is, of course, assuming there's such a thing as truth and reason and so on. We'll get to the other option of that. But we'll try to think a simpler thing.
what, in a political sense, meaning?
Yeah. Assuming there's such a thing as justice. If you don't, there's no such a thing. Okay. Wait.
Okay, sorry.
Assuming, we're putting this on the side for now. Assuming there's such a thing. So my argument was somehow very theoretical in the sense of like, I mean, someone could come and tell me I am fighting for justice because I'm right, and therefore I'm not fighting for myself. It's not my ego fighting, right? It's not my self-interest fighting. It's fighting in the name of the truth. Happens to be that in this case I am the one who's right, so I'm the one fighting. It's also on my interest, but I'm not fighting just for my self-interest, right? I'm fighting for the.
My self-interest takes a form.
No, it's not about my self-interest at all. By the way,
Not my self-interest,
no
my justice takes a form, sorry.
almost no people ever have facts in the name of self-interest, right?
Yeah, but I'm saying my
not
words for
only
the sake
that,
of
it's very
justice,
hard-
it's for a
it's very
specific
hard.
kind.
It's very hard to get angry for self-interest, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're angry at someone or hate them, there's almost always an argument. It's not something that maybe it's a bad argument, maybe I'm wrong, but there's always because I think that I'm right. It's not just because I think I want to have more stuff, right? And now, let's say someone says this, and I tell them, okay, so now we had a question. Let's repeat the question. We had a question that said, okay, but if you're fighting for justice and not for your self-interest, right? Which is what you were telling me, you should not be doing the action that you're doing, because that doesn't seem to have any way of resolving the question of justice. It can only resolve your self-interest question, which we agreed it can resolve. But nobody had a question, nobody had ever a discussion that force or power can resolve questions of whose interest wins, right? My argument is only with the person who's claiming it's not about my self-interest, and I think that this is true for almost every person that ever has a fight or a war. It's always not claimed at least to be in the name of self-interest. Of course, we could always be suspicious and say it's really self-interest dressed up as ideology, but assuming we're talking with this person, right? So we're taking it seriously, and we're saying, but you have a problem. So they're saying, well, happens to be you're wrong. So now Shmuley says I'm wrong. Why? Because it's true that the force cannot resolve questions of justice in the sense of what people should think, but it can resolve practical justice, right? Maybe when I said I'm not in the name of self-interest, I didn't mean to say I'm not in the name, right? I made this classic Socratic sort of confusion that I do, where I'm confusing the doing of the thing with the knowing of the thing, right? Socrates always thinks that knowing of the thing is what really doing the thing is about, but maybe this is wrong. This is a Aristotelian kind of response, where we say, we didn't really mean to say, we could even use the term knowing, right? We could even use the term knowing. I want everyone to know what I'm right. But I don't mean philosophical knowing. I don't mean theoretical knowing. Like, give me a proof that
I mean that they're going to look
right.
at the town and
what
say,
I mean is what I mean is even something more than that. I mean the practical kind of knowing, where it's like, we know that if you want to do something, you have to get this guy's permission, not that guy's permission. Like, we know that you don't attack these people because why? Because they're going to fight back and you're going to lose, whatever it is. But maybe I was never looking for the philosopher to agree with me. Maybe that's an entirely separate conversation. And true, for that conversation, the war doesn't resolve anything. But maybe I was not looking for that at all. Maybe I was only looking for the practical kind of people to win. And that's also justice, right? You have to agree that justice doesn't only consist in knowing what justice is. Of course, Socrates likes to say that.
But
But
also consists of it being carried out.
he has to agree that justice, at least in some sense, consists also in doing it. Exactly. So maybe we can resolve the doing of justice. Now, this is not, this still, you realize that we didn't really resolve the problem, only if we add in this middle thing that I just said, that there's some kind of practical knowing. Because otherwise, we're still left with the problem
So
that
you
we
did a slight
didn't,
mistake and not a
that you
major
didn't,
mistake.
wait, but, okay, that we didn't say, because even if I say, okay, I don't really, because there's like this, there is going to be this dichotomy. Either you say, I'm fighting the war in the name of justice, I want to be right, I want the rightness to be shown. Or you say, I just want to win. Now, winning, power winning, can resolve self-interest conflicts. Can resolve conflicts, obviously, because conflict just means, I like this and you like it, who's going to have it? Now I have it. Was resolved, finished. Question, no more question. The question, the interest question.
What do you
is
mean by
resolved.
self-interest? Like,
Just in the
when
sense of
want
I want this and you want it, same. If I want the table and you want the table.
So does it make me
so that's
not
called-
want anymore after you, let's say, just get it? Or
No, and just in the sense of not you can still want it, but you don't have it. It resolved the conflict. Like there's no more conflict, right? You could.
Right.
The conflict isn't in my head. The conflict isn't in the reality, right?
Right.
The conflict is in who has the table, and there's only one table.
So maybe the question
we can't
is-
both have it. That kind of problem, that level of problem, can definitely be resolved by some guy coming and taking it and killing the other guy or whatever it is, right? By the way, if I kill the other guy, then there's nobody to want it either.
Okay, that's true.
It's only problem of he's still wanting it is only a problem if he's still alive, or if
Right.
someone is still alive. Okay?
Right.
If the will, we can solve the problem of will, can also
Solve
be
through
resolved
that.
by killing. Definitely resolved. Maybe you have to kill a lot of people. It can be resolved, but the theoretical problem cannot be resolved, right? Because it's not an argument. Just that the fact that everyone agrees that it's not an argument. Killing the guy that if you have an argument and I kill you, I didn't prove myself right. I just proved myself stronger, which is different than being right.
Right.
But the question remains, and that's just the claim that fighting in the name of justice is incoherent. The only fight you're allowed to have in the name of justice is a philosophical argument. Any other fights are incoherent because they can't win. Right? And now you're trying to resolve it by sort of putting justice closer to self-interest, but you don't want to put it entirely to self-interest because then it becomes not justice anymore. So if you find a way of making justice something between whose interest wins and what is the truth, who is right, then you'll figure out, but we have to figure out that way.
Right, and the question is also then, what happens in a situation where conversation is impossible, right? Or
Then we're back in the self-interest world. That's fine. That wasn't a problem. If we can't,
I know, but you can also argue.
we don't have to have conversation. This whole concept of having conversation is a big. I didn't say anything about having conversation.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, I'm just saying is, imagine the following circumstance, right? I believe we should paint the town red. You believe you should paint the town blue. Say, okay, let's talk about it, and you say no, right? Or for whatever reason, another reason why we might not be able to enter into conversation is, I think no matter how convincing the argument is, you won't.
Well, no problem. So the question is if they should. Are we arguing about they should paint the town red or the town being painted red? Because if you're arguing about they should, then you're just going to be stuck. If I just close my ears and I don't listen to you, you're never going to win. I already won, then win. We're in a stalemate just by
Yeah, but there's a problem in the sense that if I believe that the town should be painted red, I should also paint it red.
So what kind of thing is this? Is this practical activity, like this actually painting it? What kind, is that a justice thing? It's just like, that's your opinion of justice, very cute. But that wasn't my argument with you, right? I didn't ever disagree with you that you could go out and paint it red. It's a practical question. Do you have enough painters? Are the painters going to listen?
Yeah, I mean, when that top level conversation fails, that's what I'm talking about. When the intellect conversation fails.
Then me and you have nothing to talk with each other anymore.
Right, so then what do we paint the town?
We don't. Because why do you want to paint the town? Only because you want it. Like, is there a reason besides for it being right that
Okay,
you
so
want to
there's
paint
the
the
question,
town?
do we only want justice to be carried out so that other people believe in it? Or so that
No,
other people
you
know
want
it's true?
justice because it's right.
Right.
But you can't claim to do it if you're not doing it because it's right.
Maybe I had
Because now you're only doing it because you're stronger, not because it's right.
Okay, well let's put it this way. Just to equalize it, let's say there's no war, right? And I want to paint the town red.
Yeah, they decided.
The town should not be painted red.
No, of course not. You could paint things whatever.
Everyone in the town should be arguing until they're
like,
convinced that the town should be
you see, the problem with the red is that we don't have. It's very bad example to use. It's the kind of thing that analytical philosophers do, is that they give you an example that has no intuition in it. That's not a real story, and then you confuse your thought, right?
Yeah.
Because so we have to talk towards an example that's real. I think that you should be punched in the face because you stepped over a snail before. Anyone that steps over snails gets punched in the face. Okay. Now you think obviously that you shouldn't get punched in the face. There's cases where people say I should get punched in the face, right? If you're like submit to the rules of the city and this is the punishment, and you're like, yeah, I don't like being punched in the face, right? Someone could say I don't like going to jail, but I agree that I should go to jail, right? I might try to fight it because I'm get a lawyer because I don't like it. It's not in my self-interest, but I do agree that I should, right? So we could split these two things. They don't have to go together. Someone could accept a punishment, although he doesn't like it, but he still thinks it's right.
That the next argument goes against that, though, in the side.
Why? No, Socrates is pro. Socrates thinks that punishment also only works if they teach something, but whatever. But if the punishment is
this issue is only this issue again is only if you're trying to make justice right through actual fighting. Right. Meaning,
that's the problem.
But if that's not how we're trying to resolve the justice, then there's no.
Then what are we resolving? Something else? Yeah, that you resolve something else.
No, we both have our ideologies and we're fighting over it, but it's not through a fight. Meaning, it's not through a.
So if we're having an argument, that would be a whole different discussion. There would be, according to the people that believe in an argument, that would be the correct way to win that war.
Right.
Because if you actually win an argument, of course, provided the person is in the correct state and he listens to you and so on, then you kill. That's the way, right? You can't kill an idea. Of course, you can kill an idea by disproving it, right?
Maybe you're smarter than me.
Those are issues. Those are technical problems. Those are technical problems. We're assuming that I could show you.
Strength is also technical.
I'm
stronger than you. I won you.
No. I don't think so. I'm going to say, of course, someone who's skilled at rhetoric, which is the art of convincing people of things that are wrong,
right,
could make you think things that are wrong, which means that winning an argument in that sense is not going to help either. But if there's a skill called thought, which is separate from rhetoric, which is not the art of convincing people of things that are wrong by confusing them or for denying them a cup, but its only criteria is truth. And I don't think you'd have to be very smart for that. Of course, maybe in order to make the argument, to figure it out, you would have to be smart. But it's not a prerequisite to be like a very smart person for that. You just will figure out the basic rules of how it works or whatever it is. Then I could kill an idea, right? That's how you kill ideas, by disproving them, right? But otherwise, it seems like you're stuck. Either you're giving up on proving the rightness, and you say, okay, I don't care. I think what you're getting at is something that makes a lot of sense. You're like, but the problem is that it goes back to self. I see in the street and the newspaper people getting stuck at this. We're framing it a very high register, but this is thing that people get stuck at.
Justice?
Because take the example, exact example. Most of the Jews think that the Israelis are right. They don't only think that they're right in the sense of might makes right. There are some people that believe that. We'll get to that maybe if we have a second. But most people don't believe in might makes right. Most people believe that right is separate from might, right? We're right, even if we lose, we would still be right? And the name of that being right, then they have two options. Because we could convince you that I'm right? That would be maybe the ideal case. We'll go to the United Nations, we'll give our sob story, or whatever convinces them, and then they'll say, yes, you have the right to do whatever you're doing. Right? Yeah. Always waiting for the leader of whoever to say, you have the right. Right? The right to defend yourself, by the way, makes no sense. It's the right to live in a certain way, in a certain place. And now someone can say, okay, now the people saying, if that fails, if I can't convince you that I'm right, I'm still going to do it. Why? Because I still want to survive, right? But you see how you suddenly switched your motivation from being right to surviving. Very nice, everyone wants to survive. But then, besides you can't expect anyone to specifically support you just because you're stronger. It's not a very good argument. Also, you switched. Now your motivation is very different. Now you're a different kind of person. Now you're not acting in the name of God. Now you're acting in the name of everyone wants to survive. Besides of your will to survive. No problem.
And if your will is really to survive, is a war the best option?
Then we
opens up those questions.
right. And then I would tell you that that's not really true because nobody's really fighting just to survive, because there's always a way, you could always sort of surrender.
Survive in a way.
Maybe you
Survive
can't.
as-
We get into like factual conversations, we get into empirical discussions with like empirical Zionism. Like, is it possible for the Zion without a state? Okay, either it is or it isn't. Nobody really wants to have that conversation, right? What you're sort of getting at is that it also wouldn't be just, right? It's not only that but you know there's still a problem. That it also wouldn't be just. Like, since justice doesn't only consist of being right, it also consists of doing right. If I know that I'm right, of course I could ask you how you know. If you're so right, why don't you manage to convince anyone? And I might have to find some funny excuse, like nobody wants to listen to me.
Right.
Well,
I mean, by
why do they want to listen to you?
Participation.
Yeah, he doesn't want peace. Like, did you try? It's a problematic argument, because any argument of level of argument which is based on people not wanting to listen to you starts to sound like a conspiracy theory. It's very not Socratic, because Socratism is always about believing that other people have arguments, right? Even if they're wrong, but they're wrong at least. They're not just crazy, right? That's the difference. But if you say, okay, I don't know, for whatever reason, this is not an option to convince you, but it's still just for me to fight in the name of what I think to be justice, because at least the outcome will be just, something like that, according to me. Of course, the outcome won't entirely be just. In other words, it won't really be an exhibition of justice. Does this make sense?
The victory won't be just.
Very good. So the victory won't be just. In other words, the story, the narrative
Right.
of victory won't be just.
It's not
Seems
the
to be a real problem.
yeah, whatever.
What?
It's not the Maccabim story of Masat,
The
whatever.
Macam story from the side of the
The Meimat Show
Gideons.
story.
The Macam story from the other side.
Right.
And from their side, I don't know what they say. You see? So now there's something very important. After this is a historical point that I have to make, because it seems to be important. It seems, of course, we could always say you're reading one-sided stories, but it seems to be like two points. Number one, and I'm pretty sure there must be a resolution to this problem. I don't think we should buy my problem here. There is this resolution. I just don't know what it is. And on one side, and there might be also a practical resolution, like you're saying, maybe, but you could see that in the real world, this philosophical puzzle is playing out. It's not only a philosophical puzzle, but one thing, and like a historical thing, is if you really have an ideology of might mix, right? Like, let's say you're Nietzschean, Darwinian, whatever, that kind of shit, then you can consistently claim to be fighting in the name of right, which is just another way of might, and then side that. And that actually, you would bite the bullet and say that if I lose, that proves that I was wrong. This is exactly what Mr. A.H. said when he lost the war in Berlin, and he sort of, since his ideology was very much anti-justice, anti-morality in the sense of, right? And this whole vulgarization of the Nietzschean slave morality theory and everything, and he basically realized when he was losing the war, and he said, okay, I guess we deserve to lose the war. How do we know we deserve to lose the war? Because we're losing it. It was literally things, at least when he blamed the German people, he said that
He believed in that?
Yeah, he said things like that. So that you failed me, well, it was always like, I was the tzaddik, or the people failed me, whatever it is, but I think there was actually a thought that said that. And so that would work. People that actually believe in might makes right, if they lose, they have to say, turns out, we don't deserve, because who deserves to win? The stronger deserves to win, right? There's like a theory that says, the stronger deserves to win. And that's, of course, a very amoral position. Maybe it's true, but it's very amoral. The other thing is that you get the impression, if you read the Bible and if you read old, like ancient sources, you get the impression that there is a thought that says, and I think that this thought changed. One of the most important moments in Jewish history is where we gave up on this thought and we went to the Socratic definition of justice. We have to realize this, and we're sort of stuck in this. I don't have a resolution. I'm just saying where we're stuck, because in the Chemesh we have like Hashem Milchama. If we win a war, it was God that won, and of course behind this is also that if we lose a war, it was God that lost. And we expect, for example, and it seems like it makes sense at least, right? Of course, you could say the other side didn't agree with this, but in theory they would agree with it, right? And we expect the Mitzrim and the Egyptians and the whoever else we were fighting with to realize that our God won their God if we won, and vice versa, right? Theoretically, of course, we would never say that, but we say things like this, like Moshe and Yeshua keep on saying, if you will, they try to write this is Moshe is blackmailing God, saying, if you will lose, we will lose the war. You're going to be the loser, not me, right? Basic blackmail, and it has this logic. Yechezkel uses this, right? This is called Lamanch Kiddush Hashem. All these theories of all the tefillahs of Moshe and Yeshua and Yechezkel, they all go with this same theory that says that us losing would actually prove that the justice or God is not either. Okay, this sounds really weird because we're very used to monotheistic thinking and almost doesn't make sense. But if you think of it in a polytheistic sense, which is also, by the way, polytheism is a problem because are there more than one justice? If God in the sense of justice, how could that be? Okay, but there might be a way to resolve it. But in that sense, we do agree that if we lose, our God lost. Somehow. Right? At least we're losers. At least the understanding we have of God or whatever justice we thought, whatever we thought justice was a mistake. It's the Egyptians that have the correct version of justice, and they were right.
You're still stuck with this problem of the fact that at the end of the day, the idea lives.
No, actually, it's very clear in the kind of rhetoric that we read in the beis tradition and the earlier rhetoric of the Bible is very clearly that the ideas don't live if they lose a war. And
is that the case?
Yeah.
No, I don't mean is that true?
That's at least the way.
Is it the case that ideas can lose by being overpowered?
Yes. That's again. How it works, I can't explain it.
Right. That's what I'm asking.
But no, that's why I say this is an historical point. Historically, if you read these books, you definitely get the impression that if we lose, there's also that this question: will you lose? Will you agree that you lost? The answer is yes. Otherwise, the tefillahs of Moshe don't work. When he says Lama Yem Mitzrayim, all these things, they don't work. Or even when we say our God is stronger, is better because we won a war, that wouldn't work either. And it's very clearly works on both sides. And we even explicitly try to say that the people on the other side said this. Oh, our God is stronger, right? Or our version of justice, or if you want to say it, is more correct. Which is another way of saying our God is stronger. It's very explicit, this. And it's a very important move that happened, which is after Chad Beis Rishon.
But this is kind of like the Darwinian.
I don't know. I didn't explain it. I'm not just saying.
I know, but I'm just saying there's a reversal of the meaning what we said about might makes right. This is a reversal of that, which is right makes might.
Yeah, I don't know what the theory behind it is. I'm just telling you a fact that it works like this, and it actually works.
But it bears the symmetry.
There is a symmetry. Yes.
The symmetry to this idea of might makes right is that this configuration is that right makes might.
I don't know. I don't know what it is. Well, it's at least that might is a sign of right? It's at least based on this idea of a providential universe, where, in some sense, whoever wins, that's what the God wanted to win, and therefore that God is correct, and the other God sort of dies if he's
right makes might.
Right?
So
I don't know. You're trying to give a theory for it. I don't know what the theory of it is. I think that the theory is stuck in the same problem that we discussed until now.
So I don't know what account. I'm not saying it's an account. I'm saying that's a description.
I don't know. No, it's that might. You could also describe it as might makes right if you want. I don't know how to describe it. Might makes, like I told you, if you're a full Darwinian, that this also works. I don't know how it works. The fact is that it works.
If you think in a monotheistic term, though, you can't say.
You could say whatever you want.
I'm saying, but God's not wrong. Right?
Obviously, you are wrong. You were wrong. It's even worse than that. At least you were wrong, right? You deserved it.
Right.
It doesn't really matter.
So it's not a fight with the gods, though.
Said it, but it becomes even worse. It means that if you lose a war, you were wrong.
Fine.
Or you deserved it, right?
Fine. Yeah.
And even that is maybe even that is a switch, because I was going to say that. I mean. I can't get into the theology and all of that. We have to figure that out in the philosophy. I'm trying to keep to this very simple framework. But in reality, if you think about who is right, if you think about losers of wars, when the Israelite people or the Jewish people, however you want to call them, lost wars in Nasser Shvatim or whatever, they sort of assumed that means that they were wrong, and they went along with it. Right? We came up with this idea after Chad Beis Rishon. We came up with the idea that said that we lost, right, and we're still right. Now there's two versions of this idea. One version says we deserved it, right? There is this thought that we deserved it. Kind of complicated, because what happens with this is Yecheskel's argument the whole time. If we deserved it, but what about God's part, right?
What about, let's say, the Madrash?
Yes. Does this mean that God, our God, was wrong? And of course, we can always, there's like an answer to this which says our God did it to us because we deserved it. But then we sort of get stuck in between these two things. If you deserved it, then again you should sort of submit to whatever is going on. But he doesn't really say that. Or at least he thinks that this deserve must be a temporary thing because of Shiva and all kind of thoughts. But in the most basic sense, I'm pretty sure that we sort of broke this connection between winning and being right. We said we lost and we're still right. And even though we think we deserve to lose.
It's not entirely the Socratic idea, right?
It's not in some
you could deserve to lose and be
yes.
right because you didn't deserve to for your justice to be carried out. You only deserved for your justice.
Yeah, this is very Socratic. But we definitely broke the at least the one aspect of the previous thought, which is that if you lose, then your idea of justice was wrong. Because we have a bigger idea of justice, which you could call this monotheism, a more wider idea of justice, a more absolute idea of justice. We say, no, justice was carried out. This was just. Maybe I don't understand how it was just, but it was just.
But their winning
therefore losing doesn't mean that I was only means in a very limited sense that I was wrong or something. Doesn't mean that I was entirely wrong.
And victory is not a verification of justice, of the justice of the
other
victor.
Side. Exactly.
It just might be the triumph of some greater kind of justice.
We tried to say the Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar wasn't right. He was just a stick. He was just like the Punisher. He was only right in the sense that the guy that
we were supposed to be punished. Not that he was supposed to be punishing.
He was only maybe he was supposed to be punished, but he was only right in the sense that the guy that gives the patch when there's a punishment, the executioner is right for killing his victim. He's right in the sense of doing the correct thing, but he's not right in the sense that there's a count. We don't have it. In other words, we sort of reframed it. Let's say it like this. This comes up. According to the theology of we deserved it. We never had a war with Nebuchadnezzar. We never had a conflict with him. You realize?
We only received the punishment by his hand.
Yes. This isn't Sukkim, let's say this. But that's a very weird framing of a war. We get back to our original problem, where now we didn't really have a war. For our third reason. But that the Jewish wars never happened. The Romans were just sticks. They were God punishing us, but we never had a war with the Romans. And therefore there's no glory in fighting the Romans. All the discussions of war, all the theology of war disappears.
Why?
Meaning, again, this is the contemporary assumption, right? Meaning, especially from the non. I
mean, it's very weird because people actually fought in that war. And I'm pretty sure that's not what they thought.
Yeah, it's a problem. But I'm just saying this does reflect
why did they not fight a war? What do you mean?
Because a war means I think, again, a war in the proper sense means I think I'm right, you think you're right. Whoever wins is going to pretend, at least to claim that his version of justice is the correct one. Right? And that's what our definition of a war. Of course, we claim that this is incoherent, but that's what wars are. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any wars. Now, the actual specific people actually had a war. The Romans or the Babylonians actually had a war with the Jews, and both sides claimed to be right. And then after we lose, we turn around and say, turns out we never had a conflict with you who was right.
Happens to be both those wars they were exiled.
Which means we lost.
Killed.
No, that's wrong. Whatever. But it doesn't matter how the exact technical history happens. We call it an exile. It's more complicated than that. But doesn't matter. Whatever it is, we lost the war. There was a war. We lost. We got conquered. For whatever exact details of it, but then we pretended that it wasn't a war in the first place, right? Well, there was no war. The outcome of this war is to claim that there was no war. There was a punishment by God. Punishment and a war are two different concepts, totally different concepts, right?
Oh, how are you saying?
I mean, your ideal...
There's not even a question who was right, the Jewish God or the Roman God.
Because you're saying the result of
There's only one God.
That in the beginning, the Mafreya was never even the question because it was supposed to happen?
because it's not there's no two versions of justice debating, right? It's not that the Romans came and said
because the Jews agreed that this is the result.
And exactly. So in some sense.
So this must be right. So there was never an argument to begin with.
It was never an argument because the losing didn't prove us wrong.
There was no truth at stake.
The losing didn't prove us wrong.
Right.
Or if you want, you could reclaim it. You could reframe the whole thing and say, we thought we deserved to win because we're tzaddikim. Turns out we're not tzaddikim. A very small machlokes, right?
Yeah, you could flip it 1,000 ways. You could say you're doing your shtadlus by fighting.
Whatever. The point is that then this whole idea, these two ideas, and
so why did we cry about it? That was just, or that was.
Good question. We shouldn't cry about it. We should just do tshuva and try to become just,
cry about deserving. It all day, right?
Who was we?
No, I'm saying like
there's different interpretations of this crying. There's one interpretation which is we're sad. Okay, so there's two interpretations of that. One interpretation is that we're sad that we lost. Well, just being sad is just a different.
But there was no war. It was
exactly. Right? So, but we're sad for losing. We're still sad for not deserving it. Or another, the interpretation that takes, just to be clear, the interpretation that takes this theory seriously, that we deserved it and it was just a punishment, doesn't cry. It only does tshuva. You could cry in the sense of I'm sad. It's sad, but there's not a real meaning to that crying. The only real meaning is I was wrong, therefore I should stop doing.
There's no sense of tshuva on Tisha B'Av.
Thank you very much. That's because nobody actually bought this theory that we deserved it. Okay? Uh-huh. That's why. Because that's a crazy theory. Just to be clear, it's like 1,000 plus second, that's what we claim to pretend, we claim to proclaim, but to be real. Anyone goes around, look, we deserved it, so I'm sad. That's not what we think. No, because we do think there was a war. We're stuck in this conflict. I don't think it was resolved by saying these kind of things, of course. Anyways.
No, meaning just as a simple way out. Like you could say, hey,
there's all kinds of simple ways out. The problem is that we're not coherent with them, right? We just proposed 5 different simple ways out. The problem with all of them is that we don't take any of them seriously. We keep on trying to have it both ways, right? And of course, now that we are back to trying to make wars, we're sort of stuck between these two. Like this so-called official Haredi line is again that there's no war in real life, right? This is why Haredim don't fight in the army, because they don't believe that there's a war. There isn't a conflict between who's right. There's only God punishing this way or that way, so we could do tshuva.
Is that the official case, or they just don't agree with?
I'm not giving you political thoughts. I'm just giving you the.
No, I'm not responding to that. I'm saying they would fight for a different war.
No, there's no war. Oh, of course, they have a war with the secular
because
so
they would fight for that.
Very good, because they believe that that's a conflict. We have a certain idea of the just, and they have a different idea of the just. They don't actually see.
They believe this is a conflict they don't have interest in.
No, of course they have an interest in, but they don't think that there's such a conflict because they really officially, of course, nobody really believes this, but official Jewish theology since Chal Beis Hamikdash has been that the Goyim don't have wars with us; they're just punishers. This is Yirmiyah Novi's theology, it's not my theology. Therefore, it doesn't really make sense to fight it with a goy. It only makes sense to the Jew. Of course, then we get into that again, back to the self-interest. The lowest sense, yeah, of course, I don't like to be killed, so I'll try to protect myself and so on. But
still not a war.
And of course, no, it's not a war. It's not a war, and you can't. Seems like if you walk by my theory that I just made up, you can't actually motivate anyone to fight a war in the name of that. It's very hard.
In the name of self-interest.
Yeah. So the Jews changed over time where they did fight wars and where they didn't?
Yeah, of course. We stopped this theology of there not being a war is the theology of the people that never fought wars, or that either that lost and decided to reclaim it this way, and the people that are still entirely in this theology. Can you still feel like that by
actually physically fighting a war?
The Jews that believe this are not actually physically fighting any war, never.
But they did.
Who? When?
Historically, right? They fought the Romans. That
was before we made up this theology.
So when did they come up with this
When
theology?
they lost, of course.
So only when they lost?
Of course, we lost more than once, so it's complicated. I'm not giving you like a very precise history over here. I'm using history as a way of... I'm just trying to claim there is a historical problem. It's based on these paradoxes. And yeah, of course the people, just to be clear that we actually know that Chachamim, for example, in beis, we know that the Chachamim who were very honest to this theology didn't believe in fighting the Romans. It was the people that believed in Jewish
Yeah, they
glory.
actually left.
that-
They
Exactly, they were just like, we're going to survive. We don't care if we lose the war. There's no war.
right.
It's the people, if you read Joseph, the people that were fighting in the name of glory, which is glory, just a way of saying, I am just, we're right, and therefore righteousness should win. Very different, right?
Actually, it was the real Haredim that fought. No,
No, I don't know what you call it.
Whatever.
It doesn't matter. So that's the point. And now that if we want to claim, this is why it becomes hard to claim this. It becomes very hard to claim that, you see, for example, the Haredi people, like the Satmar Rebbe, or really all Haredi people have the same problem. Whereas, like, if we claim that God is helping us, we have to claim that we deserved it. And our basic tradition says that we don't deserve God to help us. That's our position. We never deserve anything. So, maybe we did. No, but well, obviously, maybe I deserve it, but that guy doesn't deserve it, right? That's another basic Jewish belief. Maybe I deserve it, but the other guy doesn't keep Shabbos. Well, maybe he does other mitzvahs. Just decide that it doesn't deserve it. It can't be. So therefore, that's their basic problem. But you realize that in the ancient theory, that doesn't come into the question, because the question is who deserves it. The question is who's right in this specific conflict, which is the way of saying
victory.
which is makes like our God is right and not their God, or our concept of what's just. Right? And it's very hard to believe that sense of who is right in this conflict of what's just, in other words, this war of the gods, nobody would say, even the Satmar Rebbe wouldn't say that the Iran is right in that conflict, right? The Iranian God isn't more right according to him. It's just that he doesn't have this concept. He has a concept of God using what kind of things to punish the Jews and to reward them. But then he is worried, do we deserve this reward? Does it mean that he rewards people that are secular? All these questions are questions based on the new theology that we have, not new, very old. But in any case, and if the basic, I don't have a solution today. If we could resolve this without, and I'm pretty sure that the people that resolve it, I know people that either end up in the might makes right sort of position, where God is just makes, and then you could also say that winning wars shows who's right. Since God controls the world, and the real question is, what is God? Is God the one that's the strongest, or is God the one that's the rightest? Very big question. Obviously, everyone believes both. Right?
Then you can't have a world.
Because you gotta have full perfection. What?
Then you can't have a world where the right people lose wars.
Of course, yeah, you can. If it does, it's a question called the problem of evil. But theoretically, yeah, of course, everyone believes that everyone who believes in the God that has providence believes that. But the question is the more important? Like, does this boil down? Like in God, something I could say something like this, but this is like jumping to theology. Since God has all perfections at the same time, then to God being the mightiest and being the rightest isn't a different thing, are the same thing. But to us, they're different things. And therefore, when we interpret God and we try to claim that since whoever wins is right, of course, we don't really take it seriously because we don't say it when the other people win. So again, because we do have the Socratic view of justice, and we sort of Socrates' basic point is that God should be good more than he should be strong. That's why he said we should not read Homer anymore.
Not what?
You should stop reading Homer. That's the Republic says. Because in Homer the gods are just strong. And they sometimes do bad things. But Socrates said God's only good. They only do good things. So, and then we get stuck. If we still want to claim, like in the biblical Homeric sense, that the God decides what the war, who wins the war, then we sort of get stuck in this sense, and I'm pretty sure that many people sort of just decide that therefore the main point of God is to be the strongest, not to be the goodest. Well, that's a very weird position to have.
And you're still just left with might makes right.
Yeah, but not only that, you end up with that theology.
Right, that might makes right not just for you but for God.
Because what makes God God is that he's the strongest.
Might, right.
And then, like, do you not agree that God is the strongest? But I think no, God is not the strongest, or at least the point of God for us, or the aspect of God that we should care more about, is the fact that he's the goodest, not that he's the strongest, the rightest. Right? And then he should make the right. He still should make the right people win. But it becomes like a question of signs more than a question of actuality, right? It becomes like, is this a sign that God loves us because we won? Which is a very different kind of question than is
But also
the winning
right,
proof. It's not a proof, it's a sign.
And again, it's still
Changes from
a
proof to a
verification
sign.
of the Socratic idea that we might be right and still not see that expressed in mind.
Yeah, we still believe that because maybe we're reading the signs wrong, or maybe the sign is backwards, or whatever, all kind of things like that. If it's not a proof,
Or we're
it's only
losing a
sign.
different word that we should lose.
Yeah, all kind of things like that. Ideal, I think that the true ideal, like Socratic Messianic ideal, and all the ideals are Messianic ideals, the Socratic Mashiach is one that convinces everyone that we're right. And that's why I have to say this, that's why, just in Kabbalah, that
Rambam was an Aristotelian.
no, that's why we could talk about total destruction of our enemies, and if you're Socratic, unlike if you're a more practical Baha'u'llah, where you can't talk about that.
Probably talk about submission.
You could talk about submission, you could talk about winning, being more strong and so on. You can't talk about annihilating your enemies. It's actually like physically impossible almost, but the physical world. The physical world, exactly. When we talk about, when the Kabbalah are people that are like very into like interpreting things in the metaphysical sense, talk about the full annihilation of evil. What they mean is disproving that evil can make sense, right? If it can only work in the mind, right? It can't work in reality. If you identify evil with certain realities, then what do you mean? You say all the evil people will burn up. Well, what are you talking about? That doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. The people that interpret that in a physical sense basically end up being Nazis. That's not a good idea. To reverse Nazis instead of like that's nonsense. And they're based off of like mystical texts and texts that really say this. But the reason they can say this is because, like I said, the full, how does it called? Full victory? It's a mukhlat, I don't know. Absolute victory. Absolute victory can only be had for ideas. When an idea is destroyed, it's destroyed forever. Of course, provided that people listen. Okay, we kind of a small problem. Okay. People have to listen.
But that now listening
that's like
wars, right?
Which
is the idea that if my justice can't win in
there's,
ideas,
there's like a very optimistic view of humankind that somehow if your idea would be so correct, everyone would accept it. Even the Rambam has this idea, like he says things like this. If your idea would be so
Rambam
obvious,
still believes
so
that you might, if you had the opportunity to win a war, you should, right?
I didn't say anything about actually winning the war. Of course, and also if you're on the boat, and you should. Of course, you should. This is not the question, right? But the problem is, you should be bothered if you're in that situation. I think like halacha, if you want to halacha, the psak halacha is that if you have a war in which you can't convince the other side that you're right, you should still fight it because you're not interested in nobody's interested in dying.
But not in Roman justice.
You should stop claiming. You should still pray. You still have what to pray. This is what my answer would be. Okay, if the Jewish state wins all of its enemies and kills all of them, or makes them all weaker and so on, that would be very nice, but it wouldn't be Mashiach yet. There wouldn't be anything. It would be very far from the Mashiach that the Jews were always talking about, because we were always talking about a victory that shows justice, not just ones that shows that we can survive even your version of justice, like practical justice, right? And therefore, you still have to pray and maybe even work on convincing people that we're right. And if we're so right, it shouldn't be so hard. Like, be real. Obviously, if there's a good question, even if it's based on some fake, okay, so that's your job. Say that. But and in that sense, you could actually have a full victory. Because full victory, when an argument is demolished, there's nothing left of it, right?
Yeah, but
of course, there's always something left of it because the good part is left.
That was 2 weeks ago, Shir, where you said that the off the dark guy is the good guy.
Why is it
No, because you have teachers that are corrupt. So you can't. How does the non-corrupt over what?
People have to become good also. It's not just enough for the ideas to become good. I agree.
Right.
Well, that would be the real ideal. Otherwise, it's not. We're stuck in this like pretending to.
But we don't hold that's our job though. To convince. No.
Of course it is.
Where do you see that? We have.
We're just so bad at it that we gave up. That's fine.
No, I'm saying, where do you see anywhere that I thought we always like push away Gerim or whatever?
That's because we're so bad at it, and the ones that we found were the losers, so we decided to stop. We've been very bad at convincing people of our own justice. It's true. That's the real goodness. Extremely bad. I can't say. I mean, I say it's my fault. I don't know whose fault it is. It's
is there any hints in
big problem.
Anywhere that?
Yeah, that's what Hashem Echad Shmei Echad means. That everyone's convinced, isn't it? That's what Zechariah said. Well, yeah, Hashem Shema Yisrael, Zechariah that said that he was talking about that, right? He wasn't talking about anything besides that. If you claim that he was only talking about winning, like brutally winning wars, obviously it can't be, right? Because that's not Hashem Echad. Right. He's talking about people knowing that, and knowing can't be forced, right? That's the big thing of knowing. That's the next parak about freedom, right?
No,
freedom can only know.
Rashi says that it will be in the future.
Yeah, in the future.
Yeah, but my support of practical justice says yeah, for the Yedim.
It's not that we should work on it, it will happen.
How?
I have no clue, I don't know.
Yeah, but Zechariah doesn't say in that day people will know. It says in that day it'll just be
happen. It's very important. Of course, so
that day the town will be red, regardless of whether or not.
Said that.
No.
How? But it can't be.
It doesn't
have clear. It has to be. It can't be by coercion, right? You can't be forced because forced knowledge is no knowledge. I can force you to say things. I can't force you to know things. Right. So therefore, it's got. Maybe you want God to convince everyone. No problem. God should convince, but he has to convince. You can't just do things. Just to be clear, God. Like we talked about Pare once. The story of Moshe and Pare is not God trying to overpower Pare. It's him trying to convince him. And like we're very, very proud of the moment where Pare said, God is right. Hashem Tzaddik. Tzaddik literally means right? Righteous. Tzaddik means the right one, right?
Yeah.
That was very important. It wasn't like God is stronger than me. God is right. Now, maybe he had a might makes right there, so the Hitler decided that he's right because he was stronger. I don't know. But at least there has to be this aspect. Like we said, the question is which side of the confusion do you take? We have to take that side. Anyways, I don't know where I got to this whole drusha.
Very good drusha.
And it's very important drusha.
What do we title this? Arguments about words being arguments?
Yeah, but he said God's right because everything that happened to him.
Yeah, there's a maybe it was just because of that.
So now maybe we have to kill the Iranians to show it.
I didn't maybe, but it's not enough because we have to convince them. It seems like, of course, there's a problem that now that they stole this Socratic idea also from us, and since then nobody thinks that they lose because they lost. It's a big problem. Like I think of this.
How do we even express this biblically? Allah and
right, we can't. No, that's not a problem. Everyone always claims that their God is a God. The problem is that their concept of justice is also one that can't be destroyed.
Yeah.
I think that the way to do it is to destroy all of them. Okay, but I don't know. I could say a lot of random stuff, but there's a problem. Of course, it's a serious problem. But that's just a problem. Just a question. Them? No, this is just a problem. Just means a question, right? We don't get lost from questions. There's a question, a very serious question,
and maybe this is like a semi-historical question. But is the monotheisticization what lets us assume that, meaning if justice is simply the victory of a God, right? Then if we're
of course, but that
gather enough people
that
under
goes back
one,
like the Utah, everyone knows justice isn't defined by being the victory of a God. That can't be, right?
Right. So but we get here by all of us. Monotheism allows us to approach this idea a little more clearly about that victory doesn't mean that you're right.
Yes, in a certain sense, but just to be when you talk about like I can't.
I don't mean monotheism. I mean that us two. When you two people are fighting who have the same God. Forget about monotheism.
That it just doesn't really change because you remember that I said that when different God just means different concepts of justice of who's right.
Yeah.
Now, if the question is. If we both agree who's right, the question is a more particular question: which of us is right? That's still a question.
I mean
whose side God is on. You could say that.
I mean to say that might makes right.
It's not so different from the question of which God.
I mean to say that might makes right is a harder argument to have when we're both fighting and have the same God.
No, it's not a problem because if we have the might makes right theory, whoever wins was chosen by the God.
My God is just and my God is mighty. If he wins, justice will win.
I don't think it's so different. Maybe it's just a semantic difference. Like maybe once upon a time, someone who thought that God was meant a certain. There's two levels. We could talk about like concept of the good being different gods,
right? But
or we could talk about me being good being a different God. Now, I think that in some sense, I don't have like good proof for this, but in some sense. The polytheistic version sort of says, and I think that it's still some truth in it, sort of says that our concept of the good, which is our God, same thing, is the right concept of the good. Now, monotheism means there's only one concept of the good, which is also a very Platonic thing to say, but also a complicated thing to say, because is it true that there's only one concept of the good? Okay, you could get into different Antonio classes to figure that out. But what happens is that instead of people fighting over the concepts of the good, although sometimes they do have different concepts of the good, people start fighting over particulars, like who is good, right? We all agree. It seems like if we have the same God as the Muslims, which is a question, because the word doesn't necessarily mean the same concept. But if we have the same God, then our fight with them, if there's a fight, and not just a self-interest conflict, right? If there's a fight, the fight isn't about what is good, theoretically, in that language. The fight is about who is good, right? Which of us are fulfilling Allah's will, which is how religious people call the good. And then it's a very funny fight again. Like, what's it got to do with missiles? That fight. There's no way to prove it by missiles. The way to prove it is, I don't know. Let's fight. I don't know.
Let's talk about it.
Of course, it becomes very complicated because, like, the main, like, when people like Khomeini talk about it, they like just identify the Jews with the Western ideals of the good, and then they say the Zionists not good, right? And that's why they have the Chilik Zionists and Jews, and they say you're just part of that, and that's of course not very accurate. It's accurate in some sense, but not very accurate and then we get into a bigger problem. But okay, that's enough for actual politics. Close my video. One thing, monotheism